Before we dive into this chilling tale, make sure to hit like and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories. You won't want to miss the true, dark accounts I'm about to share. So sit tight and let's begin. It was March 15th, around 10 p.m., when it all started. I had just finished my schoolwork and was sitting on the couch, staring at the blank walls of the old house. This place, built decades ago, stood on the outskirts of Millbrook, a small town, tucked between the woods and the hills. The air was always different here, even in daylight. Something about the way the trees swayed, the kind of whispering they made when the wind was right. I always told myself it was just nature, nothing to worry about. But that night, something felt different. I had spent the evening texting my friends, telling them how I was left alone again, for the third time this month. My parents had gone on a sudden trip, and my younger sister was staying with a friend. I didn't mind being alone, but there was always this feeling that hit me when I was in the house by myself. It felt like the house was alive, and every corner hid a secret. The clock ticked loudly in the silence, and the faint sound of rain started against the windows. I wasn't scared, not really. The wind was howling outside, rattling the windows. I told myself I was just imagining things, but I couldn't shake off the eerie stillness that seemed to grow around me. I got up to grab a snack, walking through the quiet hallway, the wooden floors creaking with every step. That's when I heard it. A soft knock, not at the door, but from somewhere in the house, loud enough to make me pause and look around. I froze, my eyes scanning every dark corner. The living room felt colder, and I shivered. I shook my head, trying to shake off the unease. It was just the wind, right? But then, the knock came again, clearer this time, and from upstairs. My heart started racing. I went to the staircase, peering up, but saw nothing. I stepped back, my hands sweaty, but there was no way I was imagining this. With a deep breath, I went upstairs to check. The lights flickered as I walked down the hallway to my room. The soft hum of the house, the creaks, the groans felt louder, like they were following me. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Everything looked fine. My door was still shut, the windows locked. But then, I noticed something strange. My bedroom door, which I knew I had locked, was slightly ajar. I never left my room like that. A small sliver of light escaped from the crack in the door. I slowly pushed the door open, only to find everything exactly the way I left it. But the cold in the room, it wasn't natural. It was like the air had changed, thick and heavy. I stepped inside and looked around, feeling like someone was watching me. I checked under my bed, in the closet, but nothing was there. I sighed and told myself I was just being paranoid. But just as I was about to turn around and leave, I saw it, a small muddy footprint on the floor, right in the middle of my room. I froze again, staring at it. My heart raced in my chest. I knew I hadn't gone outside. I hadn't opened any doors or windows. There was no way that footprint could be there. I quickly stepped back and looked around the room again. The feeling of being watched didn't go away, it only got worse. I felt the eyes on me, even though I couldn't see anyone. I bolted out of the room, closing the door behind me, and ran downstairs. My hands were shaking, but I tried to calm myself down. It was just a trick of my mind, I thought. Maybe someone was playing a prank, but when I checked my phone, I saw a text that made my blood run cold. "I'm watching you." I glanced around the room, feeling a lump form in my throat. I knew I had to get out of the house, but the storm outside was getting worse. And that's when I heard it. A door slamming upstairs. The house was alive, but not in the way I thought. The storm outside was raging harder now, the wind screeching against the house, shaking the windows. My heart thudded in my chest as I stood there, frozen. That door upstairs, it was definitely closed when I went to check. I hadn't heard anyone come in, so why would it slam shut like that? My first instinct was to run outside, but I couldn't. The storm was too fierce, And I knew the woods outside the house weren't safe in this kind of weather. The wind howled through the trees, and the path was barely visible in the downpour. I'd be trapped. No, the house was the only option, but something inside me, something deep and primal, told me that the house wasn't safe either. I didn't want to go upstairs again, but I knew I had to. I couldn't just pretend like nothing was happening. Maybe I was imagining it all. Maybe I was just scared because I was alone. I needed answers, something that could explain this feeling gnawing at me, this sense of impending doom. With shaky hands, I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. The beam of light cut through the darkness as I slowly ascended the stairs. The creaks of the floorboards seemed louder with each step I took. The house felt heavier now, like it was pressing down on me. Its walls closing in, I reached the top of the stairs and paused, my eyes darting around. There was no sign of anything unusual, but I felt it, the air, thick and suffocating. I took a few more steps toward the hallway, but then I froze dead at the end of the hallway, just before the attic door. I saw something I shouldn't have seen. It was a shape, barely visible in the dim light, but I could make out the figure of a man standing there. He was tall, too tall, and his face was blurry, his features indistinct, like he wasn't entirely real. I gasped and stepped back, the flashlight shaking in my grip. The man didn't move, just stood there, staring at me. But there was something else that made my stomach twist in knots. His eyes, they weren't normal. They were dark, too dark, like deep voids that sucked in all the light. I blinked, and he was gone. I stumbled backward, tripping over my feet, and nearly fell down the stairs. My breath came in quick, shallow gasps. What the hell was that? It couldn't have been real, right? I shook my head, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was just my imagination, maybe. I was just tired. But I couldn't deny the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I turned and ran back to my room, locking the door behind me. I threw myself onto my bed, pulling the covers up to my chin, my heart racing faster than ever. The house felt too quiet now, almost too still. I tried to close my eyes, but the image of that man, his dark, hollow eyes, kept flashing in my mind. Minutes turned to hours. Or maybe it was just my perception of time warping under the weight of fear. But then, I heard it again. A knock. Soft. Faint at first, but unmistakable. I sat up, my body rigid. This time, it wasn't from upstairs. It was at my bedroom door. My breath caught in my throat. The knock was followed by a voice. A low whisper that sent chills down my spine. "You shouldn't have stayed." The voice was raspy, like it came from deep within the walls themselves. I slowly crawled out of bed, my mind spinning. Was someone playing tricks on me? Who else could be in the house? I crept toward the door, my pulse pounding in my ears. The house was silent again, as if it were holding its breath. I reached the door and slowly turned the handle, pulling it open just enough to peer outside. There was no one there. But as I stepped into the hallway, I saw something else, a faint light coming from beneath the attic door. I walked toward it, my feet heavy, my thoughts clouded with a mixture of fear and curiosity. The light flickered as if it were struggling to stay on, but it was enough to illuminate the small space beneath the door. I reached out and turned the handle. The door creaked, opened slowly, revealing the attic, a place I hadn't been in years. I was hesitant, but there was something pulling me inside, something that whispered that I had to know what was up there. The air felt colder as I climbed the stairs into the attic. My breath misted in front of me. The attic was dark, except for the dim light coming from an old lamp in the corner. I stood in the doorway, my hand resting on the railing, the beam of my flashlight flickering as I scanned the room. The attic was cluttered with old furniture and boxes covered in dust. It smelled of mildew and age. But then, I saw something that made my blood run cold. On the floor, in the middle of the room, was a pile of old, yellowed newspapers. I bent down to look closer, my flashlight shaking in my hands. The headlines were blurry, but one of them caught my eye. Family disappears, search efforts continue. My heart skipped a beat. I picked up the newspaper, the edges frayed and brittle. The article was dated years ago, long before I was even born. My fingers trembled as I read the headline again. Family disappears, search efforts continue. I scanned the article, but the words seemed to blur together, too faint to make sense of. The image on the front page was clearer, though an old photograph of a house that looked eerily familiar. It was the very house I was standing in. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. This was no coincidence. The family in the photograph ... They looked like they were standing in front of my house, the same windows, the same old door. But there was something off about them. Their smiles were too wide, too forced, like they knew something I didn't. I dropped the newspaper in shock, my hand shaking. I needed to get out of that attic, but the heavy air weighed me down. The footsteps started again, soft at first, like someone walking around the attic. The creaking floorboards barely audible under the sound of the wind outside. I froze. They weren't my footsteps. They couldn't be. I turned quickly, my heart hammering in my chest. There was something standing in the corner of the room. A figure tall, just like the man I saw earlier, but this time it wasn't blurry. It was clear, solid, and its eyes were locked on mine. Those dark, empty eyes. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a box. The figure didn't move, but its presence filled the room. The attic felt colder, much colder, and I could see my breath hanging in the air. I needed to leave, needed to get out, but my legs wouldn't move. It was like my body was frozen in place, held by an invisible force. Suddenly, the figure spoke, its voice low and hoarse. "You're not supposed to be here." I didn't know whether it was a man or something else. The voice wasn't human. Not completely. It was like the sound of dry leaves scratching against each other in the wind. I took a step back, my eyes never leaving the figure. It didn't move, didn't even blink. Then, the lamp flickered. The light dimmed until the room was almost pitch black. I thought I heard a sound, a whisper, faint, like someone calling my name from the far end of the room. But when I turned my head, there was nothing there. The shadowy figure was still in the corner, watching me. It took all the courage I had left, but I bolted. I turned and ran out of the attic, down the stairs, and back to my room. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my hands were slick with sweat. I slammed the door behind me, locking it. The house was dead silent again, like nothing had happened, like the figure was nothing more than a bad dream, but I knew better. The fear that had gripped me only moments ago was still there, lingering. Something wasn't right. The figure in the attic, who or what was it? And what was it trying to tell me? I sat on my bed, breathing heavily, trying to make sense of everything. The storm had subsided, but the air was still thick with unease. My phone buzzed suddenly, breaking the silence. I looked at it, and my stomach dropped. Another message from the unknown number. "You're next." The message was short, but the weight it carried was enough to send a wave of dread crashing over me. My mind raced. Who was sending these? And why was I being targeted? What did it want from me? I looked around my room again, every corner now seeming to hide something, watching me. I could feel my pulse in my neck, my hands clammy as I grabbed the phone and quickly texted back, asking who it was. But no reply came. I stood up, pacing back and forth in the small space. I had to figure this out. I had to understand what was going on before it was too late. I rushed back to the stairs, glancing over my shoulder, my every instinct telling me something was wrong. My body was on edge, and I knew I couldn't trust the house anymore. I needed to leave, but deep down, I knew there was no escape. Not yet. As I started to make my way to the front door, I heard it again, another knock. But this time, it was louder, more urgent. I hesitated. The knocking came again, and this time, I was certain it wasn't just the wind. I slowly made my way to the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. I could hear heavy breathing on the other side, like someone was standing just inches away, waiting for me to open it. My heart pounded, and I knew in that moment I wasn't alone. I hesitated, my fingers still wrapped around the doorknob, but I couldn't make myself turn it. I was too scared to know what waited for me on the other side. The knock came again, louder this time, almost demanding. It sounded like someone or something was trying to break through. The breathing I had heard before grew louder, more desperate. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, the sound drowning out everything else around me. I took a deep breath and forced myself to step back. My mind raced. Who could it be? Was it someone playing a prank, or was it the figure I had seen earlier, or something worse? I turned away from the door, my legs feeling like jelly beneath me. I grabbed my phone again, almost hoping for some kind of message, something that would explain what was happening, but there was nothing. No text, no call, no sign of who was behind it. The silence in the house was suffocating now, almost unnatural, like the world outside had ceased to exist. The wind had stopped, and all I could hear was the sound of my own breath, shallow and uneven. I couldn't stay in my room anymore. I had to do something, anything to break the tension, to find out what was happening. Maybe it was time to leave, but part of me knew I couldn't just walk out that door. There was something about this place, about this night, that wouldn't let me go. The knocking started up again. But this time, it wasn't just at the front door. It came from the windows, from the walls, and from upstairs. It was everywhere. I rushed to the stairs, my flashlight still clutched tightly in my hand. My mind screamed at me to leave the house, to run into the night and never look back, but my feet wouldn't move. I was trapped here, and I knew it. I heard the footsteps again, but this time, they were unmistakably real. Heavy footsteps, like someone was walking through the hallway upstairs. I was terrified, but I couldn't bring myself to stop moving. I needed to see where they were coming from. With shaky hands, I climbed the stairs again, careful not to make a sound. The house creaked under my weight, the floorboards groaning as I moved through the dark hallway. The flashlight flickered, its beam dimming and sputtering. I wasn't sure if it was the storm outside or something else, but I felt the weight of the darkness pressing in on me, heavier than before. At the end of the hallway, I could see the door to the attic was slightly ajar, and the light inside had dimmed, casting strange shadows across the floor. The knocking stopped. The silence was deafening. I approached the door slowly, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My breath was shallow as I pushed the door open, just enough to peer inside. What I saw made my stomach drop. The figure from earlier was standing in the corner again, but this time, it wasn't alone. The room was filled with more shadows, tall, indistinct shapes, all standing still, their dark eyes locked on me. They weren't human, not entirely. Their faces were distorted, hollow, and their bodies seemed to flicker in and out of existence, like they were trying to take shape, but couldn't quite manage it. One of them took a step forward. My body froze in place. "We've been waiting," the figure whispered, its voice like 1,000 whispers layered on top of each other. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My body wouldn't move, wouldn't obey. The flashlight fell from my hand, its light flickering and dying as it hit the ground. The room plunged into complete darkness, and for a moment, I thought I was blind. But then, the whispers started. They filled the room, and they weren't just coming from the figures. They were coming from the walls, the floor, and the ceiling. 1,000 voices, all speaking at once, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. It was a language that chilled my bones, one that didn't belong to this world. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was being crushed under the weight of the voices. They were getting louder, faster, until they were all I could hear. It felt like the house itself was alive, its very foundation shaking with the force of the whispers. And then, as quickly as it started, it stopped. The room went silent again, and I could finally breathe, though every breath I took felt shallow. and wrong. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear the disorienting darkness from my eyes, and that's when I saw it, the figure in front of me, its face inches from mine. It smiled, its lips pulling back to reveal jagged, broken teeth. "You're part of US now," it said, its voice low and cold. The lights flickered back on. The figures were gone. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, unsure of what was real and what wasn't. My body felt like it was shaking from the inside out. I wanted to leave the house, to run as far away as I could, but I didn't know if that would make a difference. I backed away from the attic, the floor creaking under my feet. I turned and ran down the stairs, but the house was different now. It felt like it was watching me, like it was alive, and I had become a part of it. I had to survive this, but I didn't know how. I stumbled into the living room, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My heart felt like it was about to tear itself out of my chest. The house seemed quieter now, but it was a quiet that didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the calm before a storm. I glanced at the windows, but the storm outside had picked up again. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the house, while the rain slashed against the glass, but it felt distant. The house was becoming the center of everything, and I was just a small part of it, helpless and trapped. I needed to think. I needed to figure out how to survive this. The thought of leaving the house seemed impossible, like there was something holding me here, something that didn't want me to escape. I walked toward the front door, my mind racing, but before I could reach the handle, something heavy slammed against the door from the other side. The impact made the entire house shake, and the lights flickered again, threatening to die out. I stepped back, my eyes wide with fear. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't just the storm. Someone or something was trying to get in. The knocking came again, this time more insistent, louder, like a battering ram against the door. I pressed my back against the wall, sliding down to the floor, my hands covering my ears in a feeble attempt to block out the noise. It was maddening. The voices, the knocking, the relentless pressure building in the house. It was like it wanted me to break, to give in to the terror that was crawling under my skin. I couldn't breathe. My head was spinning, and for a moment, I thought I might lose it, thought I might just collapse right there. But then, the knocking stopped. The sudden silence was so complete, so total, that it almost felt worse than the noise. I sat there, frozen, waiting for something, anything to happen, and then I heard it. A whisper, soft and distant at first, but it grew louder, clearer. "Leave now." The voice wasn't coming from anywhere in the room. It wasn't from the door, the walls, or the attic. It was in my head. It was inside me, twisting my thoughts, clawing at my sanity. I couldn't ignore it. I had to do what it said. I had to leave, but there was nowhere to go. I wasn't sure what was worse, staying here, where the house seemed to breathe and shift around me, or stepping outside into the storm, where the darkness seemed to swallow everything whole. My mind raced, and I fought to calm myself. The voice in my head grew louder, more urgent. "Leave now." I stood up shakily, moving toward the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. I had no plan, no backup, no idea what I was going to face out there. But the voice, whatever it was, insisted I leave. I turned the knob. The door wouldn't open. I tried again, twisting the handle with all my strength, but it was locked, the bolt holding it shut as if the house itself had decided I wasn't going anywhere. I slammed my shoulder into the door, once, twice, until the pain shot through my body. But it didn't budge. I backed away from the door, panic rising in my chest. There was no way out. And then I heard the sound. A slow dragging sound, like something heavy scraping against the floor, coming from the dark hallway upstairs. I froze. For a moment, the house was still. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and the only thing I could hear was the sound of my breathing. And then, in the silence, the sound came again, the dragging. Closer this time, I turned toward the stairs, my body stiff with terror. My flashlight flickered on the floor beside me, the light sputtering out and leaving me in the dark. The sound grew louder, closer, like something or someone was crawling across the floor. My pulse quickened, and my legs moved on their own, leading me toward the stairs before I could even think to stop myself. I knew I had to face it. I couldn't stay in the living room, and I couldn't let whatever it was find me here. I crept up the stairs, my mind racing with thoughts of what I might find. The dragging sound was almost deafening now, as though it were right behind me. As I reached the top of the stairs, I saw something at the end of the hallway, a shadow moving. I couldn't make out the details, but it was there waiting. "You can't run." The whisper came again, as though it was in my head. But this time, it felt different. It wasn't warning me. It was mocking me. The shadow shifted, the outline of a figure becoming clearer. It was tall but hunched over, its arms dragging along the floor, its legs twisted and unnaturally long. I stumbled back, my mind screaming at me to run, but I couldn't. The figure stopped in front of me, its hollow eyes staring right through me. I could see the shape of its mouth, twisted into a grin. "You should have left when you had the chance," it whispered, its voice cold and sharp like broken glass. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it disappeared into the darkness, leaving only the sound of its dragging footsteps behind. I was left standing there in the middle of the hallway, my body shaking uncontrollably. I wanted to scream, but the terror had frozen my voice. The house was suffocating me. It was alive and it wasn't going to let me go. I had to survive this. I had to, but I knew the hardest part was yet to come. I couldn't stand there any longer. My legs felt like jelly, and every inch of my skin was crawling with terror. I turned quickly, stumbling back toward the stairs. My heart was pounding so loudly, I thought it would explode. I didn't care where I went anymore, just anywhere but here. Anywhere far from the darkness that seemed to be closing in on me. As I descended the stairs, the house felt like it was shifting again, the walls seeming to breathe, the floor creaking beneath my feet with every step. I kept telling myself that I had to escape, that I had to get out before whatever was in this house completely took control. But when I reached the bottom of the stairs, I froze. The front door was wide open. I hadn't left it like that. I had tried to open it earlier, and it was locked. But now it was standing wide open, the rain pouring into the hallway, a cold wind swirling in with it. For a brief moment, I thought it was a sign and escape. I ran toward it, my heart hammering in my chest. But as I stepped closer, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The door was swinging slowly, creaking on its hinges as if something was pushing it open from the outside. I glanced over my shoulder. The house was silent again, too silent. The air felt thick, and I could almost taste the fear that hung in the room. I could feel it pressing against my chest, suffocating me. I knew deep down that leaving wasn't going to save me. I wasn't just trapped inside the house physically. Something about this place had a hold on me. Something that was already clawing at my insides. I could feel it, growing stronger, like it was waiting for me to make a mistake. I turned back toward the open door, but before I could take another step, I heard it again, the dragging sound. It was closer now, much closer, almost at my heels. I didn't have time to think. I had to act. I ran toward the door, my mind screaming at me to get outside, to get to safety. I reached the threshold, and a hand shot out of the darkness, grabbing my arm with an icy grip. I screamed, but the sound was cut off by the force of the pull. I was yanked backward, thrown into the hallway, my body slamming against the floor. I looked up, gasping for air, and saw the figure standing in front of me. Again. But this time, there were others, dozens of them. They were all around me now, emerging from the shadows, their faces twisted and hollow, their eyes empty, their grins wide and unnatural. The one I had seen before stepped forward, its face contorting. into a grotesque smile. "You can't escape," it whispered, its voice like nails scraping against glass. "You belong to us now." I tried to push myself up, but my body refused to move. My legs were numb, my arms weak. The weight of the figures pressing in on me was unbearable, like the house itself was pulling me down into the ground. The walls seemed to close in on me, the room growing smaller, suffocating. The whispers filled the air again, louder this time. More frantic, like the house itself was speaking to me in 1,000 voices. "You should have left when you had the chance. It's too late. You can't run from us." I closed my eyes, hoping it was a nightmare, hoping I would wake up. But when I opened them again, they were still there, still standing over me. The house was alive and it was hungry. It was hungry for me. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my chest, like something was pressing down on my heart, crushing it from the inside. My breath caught in my throat, and I gasped, unable to breathe. I couldn't move. My body was completely paralyzed. The figures loomed over me, their hollow eyes staring into mine, as if they were waiting for me to give in, to let go. "You're ours." The whisper came again, but this time it wasn't just a whisper. It was in my head, in my mind, wrapping around my thoughts, squeezing tighter with each passing second. I could feel my consciousness slipping away, fading into the darkness that surrounded me. Just when I thought I couldn't hold on any longer, I remembered something from earlier. The newspaper, the family that had disappeared, the house. There was a pattern. There had to be. I wasn't just another victim of this place. I was part of something bigger, something that had been happening long before I arrived. The house didn't just want me. It needed me. With every ounce of strength I had left, I forced my body to move. I kicked out, trying to push the figures away, but they didn't budge. My vision was blurry, my head spinning, but I couldn't give up. I had to find a way to break the cycle, to stop whatever was happening here. The whispers were deafening now, drowning out everything, but I gritted my teeth and forced myself to think. The attic. There had to be something in the attic. Some clue. Something that could explain how to break the curse of this house. The figures reached down, their cold hands wrapping around my arms, dragging me back toward the darkness. "You belong to us." But I wasn't done. Not yet. I fought back with everything I had left. The grip on my arms tightened, pulling me back toward the shadows. But this time, I wasn't going down without a fight. My heart was pounding in my chest, and every breath felt like it could be my last. I wrenched my arm free from one of the figures, my fingers scraping against its cold, lifeless skin. I didn't care how it felt. I was out of options, out of time. The whispers surged in my head, louder now, almost like they were coming from all directions. I couldn't tell which way was up or down anymore. I tried to focus, tried to block out the voices, but they were relentless. "It's too late." The whisper came again, and this time I understood it more clearly. They weren't just trying to break me, they were trying to consume me, to pull me into this darkness where there was no escape, no hope. I stumbled backward, my legs weak, but I refused to fall. I had to get to the attic. I had to find a way out. There had to be something there that could break this cycle. Something that could stop the house from claiming me like it had claimed so many others. I glanced up the stairs, seeing the attic door just ahead, the dim light from my flashlight, casting an eerie glow on the wooden steps. The dragging sound was louder now, but it wasn't coming from behind me. It was coming from above, from the attic itself. I didn't hesitate. I bolted for the stairs, ignoring the figures that lurked around me, their cold eyes following my every move. I could feel their presence, their weight, pressing against me, but I couldn't afford to stop. I had to push through. As I ascended the stairs, I heard the dragging again, this time accompanied by a low, guttural growl, like something was waiting up there, something that didn't want me to reach the top. I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. I had no idea how much time I had left before the house finished what it had started. When I reached the attic door, it was ajar. It looked just like the last time I saw it, a faint light flickering from inside, casting long shadows. Across the wooden floor, I hesitated for a moment, the weight of the air around me making it hard to breathe. This was it. The final step. I pushed the door open with trembling hands. The attic was cold, the air thick with dust and the smell of decay. It felt alive. The shadows here were darker, more oppressive, like the very walls were closing in. On me, in the far corner of the room, I saw a figure. It was standing there, but this time it wasn't a shadow. It was more solid, more real. Its face was the same distorted mess of features I had seen before, but this time it wasn't just watching me. It was waiting. I stepped forward, trying to steady my breath. I knew I was getting closer to the truth, but what I found next made my blood run cold. In the center of the room was a small wooden table, covered in ancient-looking symbols. At the table, there were dozens of photos of families, of people who had lived in this house, each one with their eyes scratched out. Their faces, blank and empty, stared up at me. But that wasn't the worst part. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and picked up one of the photographs. The face staring back at me was familiar. I blinked, thinking it was some kind of trick of the light, but when I looked again, I saw it clearly. It was my face. I dropped the photograph, my heart sinking in my chest. How was this possible? How had my face ended up in that picture? The growling from earlier returned, louder now. The shadows in the corner of the attic seemed to shift, coming alive as if the house itself was trying to swallow me whole. I spun around, but before I could take another step, I heard the voice again. The same one from before, the voice that had whispered to me all this time, "You were always meant to be here." My head spun. My mind raced, but nothing made sense. I had to escape, but the house had already taken hold. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't just another victim. I was part of this place. My fate had been tied to it from the moment I stepped inside. Suddenly, the door behind me slammed shut. The sound was deafening, and I turned around in a panic, only to find the attic now completely dark. The light from my flashlight flickered one last time before going out entirely, leaving me in complete blackness. I heard footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from behind me. They were heavy, dragging, like the figure was getting closer, but I couldn't see it. I backed up, my breath coming faster. There was nowhere to go. I was trapped. The whispers were deafening now, their words more urgent than ever. It was no longer just the figures or the house that was after me. It was everything. The house was alive and it wanted me. And then I heard the voice again, closer now, right behind me. "You can never leave." I turned around, but there was nothing. No one. Just the darkness. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My mind was slipping, like the house was pulling me into its depths, erasing me. I stumbled backward, and then I heard it, the sound of something moving toward me. Faster now, the scraping of claws against the floor. It was coming for me. I didn't have much time. The darkness in the attic seemed to swallow me whole, the shadows shifting and moving like living creatures, wrapping around my legs, pulling at my feet. My heart was a hammer in my chest, and I could barely hear my own thoughts over the sound of my breath, shallow and panicked. The scraping noise was getting louder, closer, faster. It wasn't a single figure anymore. It was a whole mob, dragging, shuffling, crawling. I could feel them, feel the air thickening as if something invisible was coming toward me. I wanted to scream, but my voice was lodged somewhere deep inside my throat, trapped by the suffocating fear that gripped me. I spun around, my hands blindly reaching for something, anything that could stop this madness. But the attic was empty, save for the pictures, the symbols on the walls. and the dust that seemed to hang in the air like it had been untouched for centuries. And then, through the fog of my fear, something glinted in the far corner. A box. A small wooden box, almost hidden beneath a pile of discarded things, clothes, old furniture, forgotten memories. I don't know why I reached for it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe a last-ditch hope that this box might hold the answer I needed, or at the very least, some kind of escape. My fingers brushed the wood, and the moment I touched it, the scraping stopped. The silence was so sudden, so eerie, that it made my skin crawl even more than the noise had. The figures, the whispers, the house, all of it ceased. I grabbed the box, pulling it toward me, my heart pounding in my ears. The box was old, its wood worn and cracked, as if it had been here far longer than I had. I could feel a weight inside, a heaviness that didn't seem right. I hesitated, my mind racing with 1,000 questions, but I opened it anyway. Inside, there was nothing at first, just old paper, yellowed with age, brittle at the edges. But then I saw it, a small, tarnished key, wrapped in a threadbare cloth. My breath caught. The key, it was familiar, like I had seen it before. What way was it here? The whispers began again, this time louder, more desperate. You don't understand. The voice was almost frantic now, like it was begging me to leave. You can't undo what's already been done. I held the key in my palm, feeling the weight of it, knowing that whatever it unlocked, it wasn't going to be easy. But I had no choice. I turned the box over, looking for something, anything that might explain its significance. Beneath the cloth, I found a crumpled note, written in messy handwriting. The paper was fragile, like it might crumble at the slightest touch. I unfolded it carefully. It read, "The key will open the door, but you must be ready to face the truth. Only then will you leave. You cannot escape the house. You are part of it." A chill ran down my spine. The note didn't just seem like a warning. It felt like a curse, like whoever had written it knew exactly what was going to happen to me. I shoved the note into my pocket, my fingers shaking as I clutched the key. I had no idea what it opened, but it didn't matter. If I was going to survive this, I had to know. The scraping noise started again, this time from directly behind me, closer than ever. The figures, their hands dragging on the floor, were closing in. I didn't have much time. I had to find the lock. I rushed toward the back of the attic, my legs heavy, my mind foggy with fear. The room was spinning, the shadows dancing around. Emmy, the whispers were everywhere now, in my ears, in my mind. I couldn't tell where the house ended and I began anymore. Then, I saw a dot in the far corner, a small door. I hadn't noticed it before, hidden behind a stack of old furniture. It was dark, almost invisible in the shadows, but it was there, and there was a lock on it. A perfect fit for the key. My pulse raced. This was it. This was my chance. I approached the door slowly, almost afraid to touch it. But the figures were right behind me now, their growls deep and guttural. They were getting closer, their presence pressing in on me like a vice. I couldn't stop. I couldn't think. I slid the key into the lock, and with a loud click, the door swung open. The darkness inside was overwhelming, a deep, impenetrable blackness that seemed to pull at me, calling me forward. I took a step, my breath catching in my throat, and then nothing, silence. I stood there, frozen in the doorway, as the shadows around me seemed to shift, to bend, to twist. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, louder now, almost deafening. The figures behind me were gone. The growling had stopped. But the house wasn't done with me yet. The air around me was thick, suffocating. Something was watching me from the darkness, something far older than I could comprehend. The door had opened, but it wasn't just an escape. It was a trap I had to go through. And that was when I realized the truth. The house wasn't haunted by spirits. The house was the spirit. I didn't know what to expect when I stepped through the door, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air changed. It wasn't cold, nor was it warm. It was something in between, something unsettling. The walls around me seemed to close in, their texture shifting, becoming more fluid, like they were breathing, living. I took a hesitant step forward, the floor creaking beneath my feet. The room beyond the door was unlike any room in the house. It wasn't an attic or a hallway, or even another part of the house. It was something else. Something older, like a forgotten place lost in time. The walls were covered in symbols ancient, intricate markings that glowed faintly in the dark, pulsating with a life of their own. They seemed to whisper as they moved, flowing across the walls in an eerie rhythm, like the very house was alive, speaking to me through these markings. The shadows in the corners were moving too, not just stretching and shifting, but writhing, as if they were trying to escape from the walls themselves. I could hear them, the faint scraping sounds, but they weren't from the figures that had chased me. They were something else, something deeper, darker. I felt a pull something inside. Me wanted to go further, to explore the depths of this place, to understand it. But another part of me, the logical part that still clung to the hope of escape, screamed at me to turn around and leave before it was too late. But there was no leaving now. The door had shut behind me, sealing me in. I walked deeper into the room, drawn by an invisible force. The further I went, the heavier the air became, like it was pressing against me, trying to force the life out of me. My breath was shallow now. Each inhale a struggle dot in the center of the room was a pedestal, an altar of sorts, with a single object resting upon it. The object gleamed faintly in the dark, and when I drew closer, I could see what it was. A mirror dotted. Wasn't just any mirror, though. It was old, its surface cracked and clouded by time. But there was something about it, something that made it impossible to look away. I stood in front of it, my own reflection barely visible in the fractured glass. But then, something changed. The image in the mirror began to warp dot at first. It was subtle, a flicker, a distortion in the surface. But then, the reflection shifted as if it had a life of its own. I saw my face, but it was wrong. My eyes were wider, more hollow, my skin paler, and my expression twisted. It was like looking into the face of someone I barely recognized. Someone who had been lost to time, to the house. I stepped back, my heart racing again. But the reflection in the mirror didn't stop. It kept changing, contorting, until the face wasn't mine at all. It was someone else, someone from the past. Someone who had been lost to this house long before me. The figure in the mirror grinned, its smile wide and mocking. It opened its mouth, and though I didn't hear the words, I could feel them. They echoed inside my head, filling me with dread. "You're not leaving. Not ever." The words were cold, like ice, and they chilled me to the bone. I wanted to look away, to run, but I couldn't. I was trapped in the mirror's gaze, frozen in place, unable to move, unable to escape. I felt a hand on my shoulder, cold, heavy. I spun around, but no one was there. The air behind me was empty. Then, a voice, a whisper reached my ears. "It's not just the house." The voice was low, raspy. It felt like it was coming from everywhere. "It's you. It's always been you." I whipped around again, but still, no one was there. The room was just as it had been, silent and oppressive, the air thick with the presence of something ancient, something evil. The whispering continued, growing louder now, as if the walls themselves were talking to me, reminding me of the truth. I had been running from all along. You were never meant to leave. My hands were shaking now, the key still clutched tightly in my fist. I had no idea where it fit, but the message was clear. This place, this house, it didn't just want me here. It had claimed me. I was part of it now, bound by some dark force that I had no control over. I glanced back at the mirror, my reflection, now completely distorted. The figure grinning at me like it knew a secret I didn't. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My mouth was dry, my throat tight with fear. That's when I heard it, the scraping sound again. Louder now, echoing in the room like a warning. I turned toward the source, but it was too late. They were coming for me. The figures I had seen before, no. They weren't figures. They were shadows, creatures that were made of the house itself, living parts of its cursed existence. They had waited for me. They had always waited, and now they were about to claim me. I backed away from the mirror, feeling the cold sweat on my skin, my body trembling as I tried to make sense of what was happening. The scraping noise was growing louder, faster, and this time, it wasn't just in the background, it was right there, surrounding me, coming from every direction. I could feel the shadows now, creeping closer, their presence thick and suffocating. They were everywhere, moving in and out of the corners of my vision, never fully appearing, but always there. Closing in. I tried to breathe, but it felt like the air was being sucked out of the room, leaving me gasping for something, anything to fill my lungs. I turned toward the door, hoping against hope that it would open, that I could make my escape. But it was no use. The door had vanished. There was no exit anymore. I was trapped in this place with the house and its shadows, all of them closing in on me, waiting to drag me down into their world. I glanced back at the pedestal, the mirror still, gleaming in the center of the room. My reflection was gone now, replaced by a blur of shifting shadows. It was as if the mirror had become a doorway, a portal to something far worse. I could feel them now, the creatures, their eyes on me, their presence pressing in like they were trying to crush me under their weight. I could hear the whispers. Again, but this time, they weren't distant or muffled. They were in my head, inside my mind, forcing their way through, filling my thoughts with their terrible knowledge. You should have stayed out. The voice came again, clearer now, like it was speaking directly into my soul. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the sound, but it was no use. The shadows were inside my mind, crawling through my thoughts like insects, eating away at my sanity. I turned away, desperate, looking for anything that might help me break free. And that's when I saw a dot at the far end of the room. Something was moving, slowly, quietly. I squinted, trying to make it out, and then it appeared. It was a figure. A human figure, but distorted, like it was made of shadow, its form shifting and undulating as it moved toward me. Its face was covered in darkness, its body barely recognizable, but there was something familiar about it. Something that made my heart skip a beat. I couldn't take my eyes off it, even as my instincts screamed for me to run. I knew what this was. This was the end. The house had already claimed my soul, and now the shadow was coming to take me into the depths with it. I stumbled back, my legs weak, but there was no escaping it now. The figure reached out, its hand long and gnarled, its fingers stretching toward me. You're just like us now. The voice was cold, unfeeling, and the whisper turned into a sharp laugh, like the very sound of it was designed to shatter me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning, the shadows closing in on every side. And then, just as the figure's fingers brushed against my arm, I felt it. A sudden surge like a spark of energy deep within me, something I didn't even know was there. In that moment, something clicked. I understood. The key in my hand wasn't just a key to the door. It was a key to my freedom. Without thinking, I raised my hand, clutching the key with all the strength I had left. The shadows recoiled as if the key was burning them, as if it had the power to push them away. I slammed the key into the air, as if unlocking something deep within the darkness itself. The room trembled. The shadows screamed, their form writhing and breaking apart as if they were being torn from the walls. But something else happened too. The whispers stopped. The weight pressing on my chest vanished. The air became clearer, as if the house itself was exhaling a breath it had been holding for centuries. I opened my eyes, unsure of what had happened. The figure, the shadow, was gone. The room was empty, silent. The symbols on the walls were still glowing, but they no longer pulsed with that oppressive energy. It was like the house had released me, like the key had broken the curse. I didn't know if I could trust it. I didn't know if it was truly over, but I had to move. I had to leave. I rushed toward the place where the door had been. I didn't know how the house had changed or what had happened when I used the key, but something had shifted. The door wasn't just a door anymore, it was a way out. I threw it open. The hallway outside was dark, but it wasn't the same dark. It wasn't alive anymore. It felt still, as if the house had finally let me go. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I ran, stumbling down the hall, through the rooms, past the dark corners where shadows still lingered, but they didn't reach for me anymore. I finally reached the front door. It was locked, but I didn't care. With shaking hands, I turned the handle. The door opened. I stepped outside, into the cool night air, into the real world. Free, and as I stood there, looking back at the house, I couldn't help but wonder, was it truly over? Had I broken the curse, or had the house just let me go for now, waiting for the next soul to wander in? But I didn't have the answer. All I knew was that I had survived Dot, and for the first time since entering that cursed place, I was alive. Asterisk, I stood there, at the threshold of the house, my body shaking from the cold, my mind spinning in 1,000 directions. The house loomed behind me, its silhouette dark against the moonlit sky, as if it were watching me. I could almost feel its eyes on my back, though I knew there was no turning back. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I was free, or at least I thought I was. The air outside felt normal, fresh, crisp, untouched. It seemed so ordinary, so safe, and yet, part of me was still trapped in the house. A part of me was still back there, with the shadows, the figures, the whispers. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that I hadn't truly escaped, but I didn't have time to think about it. I turned and started walking down the path leading away from the house. My legs were weak, my body exhausted, but I had to keep moving. I had to put distance between myself and that place, before it could pull me back. And Dot, as I walked, I noticed something strange. The air seemed heavier now, thicker. The streets, the trees, the distant lights, they all looked the same as before, yet everything felt wrong. It was like the world around me had shifted, like the house's curse had followed me, creeping into the very fabric of reality. I glanced over my shoulder, expecting to see the house, expecting to see the shadow still looming, but there was nothing. The house was gone, completely gone. I paused, my breath catching. Was I imagining things? Had I really left? Or had I just crossed into some kind of twisted version of reality, where the house no longer existed, but its influence still clung to me like a shadow? I shook my head. It didn't matter. I needed to get away, to find help, to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. I kept walking, not knowing where I was going, but the road felt like it was stretching endlessly before me, pulling me into something. I couldn't escape. That's when I saw a Dot at the end of the street. Barely visible in the darkness, stood a figure. A man, his silhouette tall and imposing. His face was obscured by the shadows, but I could feel his eyes on me, piercing through the night like they could see straight into my soul. I froze. There was something familiar about him, something I couldn't place. The air around me seemed to thicken, the shadows stretching out towards him as if they recognized him, as if they were drawn to him, just as they had been drawn to me. He stepped forward, moving slowly, methodically, as if he knew exactly where I was, exactly where I would be. You shouldn't have come back. His voice was calm, low, but there was an edge to it that made my blood run cold. It was a voice I had heard before too many times. I stumbled back, my legs refusing to move, my mind racing. The figure moved closer, the streetlight illuminating his face just enough for me to see it. And then I saw it. It was me. It was my face. My features, my expression, but twisted, distorted, like the reflection in the mirror back in the house. His eyes, dark and hollow, stared back at me, and I could see the truth in them. He was me. Or rather, I was him. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This man, this shadow, wasn't just someone who had followed me. He was a part of me, a part of the curse. He was the version of me that the house had created, the version that had been consumed by it. "You can't escape," he said, his voice now a cold whisper. "You were never meant to leave." I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The shadow was closing in, its presence suffocating, its grip tightening around my chest. "It's over." He smiled, but it wasn't a smile. It was a grin, a cruel twist of my own face, as if mocking me. "You belong to it now." I wanted to scream, to fight back, but the words caught in my throat. There was nothing left to say. The curse had followed me, and now it had taken control. I was no longer the one who had survived the house. I was now a part of it. A shadow, trapped in the endless loop of its curse. The world around me started to blur. The shadow was no longer just standing in front of me. He was inside me, his presence suffusing every part of my being, making my limbs feel like they belonged to someone else. I could hear his voice, but it was mine now too, echoing in my head. "You can never run from it." The words twisted and wrapped around my mind, tightening like a vice. I couldn't breathe. I was suffocating from the inside out. My heart beat in my ears, but even that seemed distant, like it wasn't mine. My thoughts weren't mine anymore. His laugh, the sound that had haunted me in the house, came again, mocking, hollow, and bitter. And I realized then, I wasn't escaping. I never would. Suddenly, the night sky overhead darkened. The streetlight flickered and died. The world was plunged into an unnatural blackness. The shadows didn't just surround me, they filled me, pulling at my skin, crawling under it. I wanted to scream, but the scream never came. Instead, I felt the ground beneath my feet shift, as if the world was warping itself around me. I fell to my knees, the darkness swallowing me whole. The shadows from the house were now part of me. I felt the pull of that horrible ancient place, as if it were calling me back. A part of me wanted to fight it. Another part of me just accepted it. I wasn't sure which side was winning, but as I crawled on the ground, I could feel the house pulling at my very essence, like a dark magnet. I didn't know what was real anymore. The air around me thickened, and the familiar streets of the town turned into something foreign. They twisted, stretching into impossible shapes. The pavement cracked, and the buildings around me began to bend, as though the laws of physics themselves were giving way to something far older, far more dangerous. Then I saw it at the end of the street. Just as before, there was the house. It wasn't my house, the house I had left behind. It was a different version, its windows black and empty, like the eyes of something that had been forgotten. The shadows were pouring out of it now, twisting and writhing, like they had been waiting for me. I felt a surge of terror, something deeper than before, as I realized that no matter how far I ran, I was still bound to it. I was still part of it, and there was no escape. The air was colder now. A strange wind began to blow, and the streets seemed even more distorted, as if reality itself was starting to unravel. I couldn't take my eyes off the house. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a living thing, a monstrous entity that had fed on me, on my fear, on the fear of everyone who had ever stepped inside it. I stood frozen, unable to move. The shadows were no longer distant. They were crawling towards me, climbing up my legs, wrapping around my arms. Each touch felt like ice, like they were draining me, sucking the very life out of me. The figure, the shadow of myself, was still standing there, watching me, its grin never fading. It was me, but it wasn't. It had become something else. It was what I had become, the version of myself that had been consumed by the house. And now it was calling to me, urging me to step back into the darkness. You're not free. His voice echoed again, louder, sharper. It's only just begun. I didn't know if I had the strength to fight it anymore. I could feel the darkness pulling me in, its grip tightening with every passing second. I had lost control of my body. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I was drowning in it. The shadows that had once been on the walls of the house were now inside me, clawing at my soul, and then something shifted. It was subtle at first, like a spark of light breaking through a thick fog. I could feel it deep inside me, a small part of me that hadn't been consumed. A spark of resistance. I focused on it. I clung to it with everything I had left. I could feel the power of the house, the curse, pulling at my every nerve. But there was something more, something stronger than all of it. The key. The key I had held in my hand was more than just a way out of the house. It was a symbol. It was the key to my own will, my ability to break free. I reached out, not physically, but in my mind. I took the key, my key, and I used it. I focused on it, holding onto it as if it were the only thing that could keep me anchored to the real world. The shadows screamed, their voices a cacophony of fury and rage. The figure, my twisted reflection, tried to grab me, but I fought back. I fought with everything I had. The shadows began to recoil. They didn't like it. They didn't want me to remember who I was, to remember the key that could break their hold. The house, the curse, it all started to crumble around me. Pieces of the dark world I had been trapped in disintegrating like sand in the wind. I kept pressing forward, feeling the strength of the key surge through me. It wasn't just a key to a door, it was a key to myself. It unlocked my will, my mind, my freedom, I screamed. Not in terror this time, but in triumph as the last remnants of the darkness shattered. The figure that had been haunting me, my twisted self, faded away into nothingness. A final whisper of a shadow that no longer had power over me, that the world around me was quiet now. The house was gone. The street, the town, they were all normal again. The air was clear, free of the weight that had once pressed on my chest. And for the first time, I felt the truth. I had survived. I had broken free. The curse was over. But as I walked away from the ruins of that cursed house, a part of me knew I would never truly forget. The house had left its mark on me, and I would carry it with me for the rest of my life. But at least I was alive.